Hi, this is Tony Northrup for TrainSignal, and in this video lesson, we're going to learn how to configure network settings in Windows 8. This should be really quick and really straightforward. This lesson maps to Objective 3.2 in the 70-687 Microsoft Certification Exam. This objective has 4 sub-objectives: connect to a wireless network, manage preferred wireless networks, something that doesn't actually exist anymore, so that won't take long, configure network adapters, and finally configure location-aware printing. That last one is a really cool new feature of Windows 8. Let's jump right in and I'll show you how to connect to a wireless network. Okay, this is so easy, I can't believe they bother listing it as a sub-objective. To connect to a wireless network, open up your Charms bar. You can swipe in from the right or hold down the Windows key and press C. Go to Settings, then click the network icon here. It's the one in the upper left corner. It's going to show different things depending on your current connections. You'll then see a list of available wireless networks. Click whichever one you want to connect to. Now, there's a checkbox here for Connect Automatically, which does exactly what you think it does. If it's a network you're just connecting to one time, you'd want to clear that. If you're connecting to a coffee shop network and it's near your office and you want to make sure you don't automatically connect to it, clear that. If it's something that you will connect regularly to, go ahead and leave that in so you don't have to select it all the time. Now, after you click connect, you'll be prompted for your network security key, so type it here. Now, in personal environments and small businesses, you typically use wireless security where you have to type in a password every time. In enterprises, they'll use an automated security mechanism that authenticates either the user or computer automatically using the same credentials, sort of a single sign-on system. You'll learn about that in a different lesson. Now, here you're prompted to either turn on sharing or turn it off. This is a really important question. It's something that people gloss over too quickly. Windows 8 and indeed earlier versions of Windows supports 3 different network profiles: private, public, and domain. Domain networks are the networks that are available anytime your computer is part of a domain and it can communicate to the domain controller. That's how Windows 8 determines that it's connected to your own internal network. Private networks are your home or a small office where there isn't a domain. Sometimes they're called work or home networks, as you see here. Finally, public networks are hotspots, coffee shops, airports, your friend's house, any place where you don't inherently trust every device that might be on the network, including the router. If there's something you don't trust about that network, if you think somebody you don't like might connect to that network from the parking lot, if it's not, it's protected by a password, you need to select public. That's the only way to keep your computer safe. You should only select this option to turn on sharing and connect to devices if you feel good about the network, if you're pretty sure there's not a bad guy connecting there, and that includes like your neighbor. Make sure that a network is password protected before you choose home or work networks. Moving on to the next sub-objective, manage preferred wireless networks. There's something that's really confusing about this. Windows 7 and indeed earlier versions of Windows allowed you to connect to different wireless networks and then you could change the order of them. This was managing your preferred wireless networks. So your home network would probably be at the top and then a coffee shop network would be down at the bottom. You kind of prioritize them, and if Windows could see more than one network, it would always pick your most preferred network first. Windows 8 doesn't do this quite the same way. In fact, it doesn't give you any control over it at all. So let's check it out. You can see here, I have 3 different networks available to me. I'm currently connected to Contoso. That's because Windows 8 thinks it's my preferred network between these 3 networks, and it will always connect me to Contoso. What if I want to connect to Fabricam instead? Well, as a user, I can manually connect to Fabricam. And Windows 8 makes a note of this. It's kind of passively watching the networks that the user connects to. And if it sees that you're consistently connecting to, say, Fabricam over Contoso, then in the future, when it comes online and it sees both Fabricam and Contoso, it'll select Fabricam. If you don't like the choice that it makes, then you need to go in and manually change the connection. And every time you do this, it's going to kind of record which one you tend to prefer. So the subobjective tells you to manage preferred wireless networks, and in Windows 8 you indeed can't do that, except in this very roundabout way where through your own usage Windows 8 learns about it. Windows 8 is designed to take care of this automatically for you, so the official answer to users is that you just shouldn't worry about it. Windows 8 is looking out for you. There is one thing you can do to take some control over this. I can mark a network as basically a lower priority network by setting it as a metered connection. So here you can see I right-clicked Contoso, and then I'm going to select Set as Metered Connection. When a connection is metered, it becomes less preferred. Now, Windows 8 isn't going to drop the connection since I manually connected to it, but in the future, when both those networks are available, it will choose Fabricam over Contoso because Fabricam is not marked as a metered connection right now. A metered connection is, for example, a wireless broadband connection. Metered means, well, your electricity is metered, your water is metered. Anything that you use more of and you pay more for is considered metered. And your home broadband connection probably isn't metered. You can use all the bandwidth you want and they don't charge you anything different. But your cell phone connection usually is metered. The more you use at some point, you have to pay a little bit more. There are exceptions, but those are the general guidelines. And so Windows 8 wants you to be able to choose whether a network is metered or not. And Windows 8 will always connect to a non-metered connection over a metered connection when both are available. It does some other smart things too, like it won't download updates when you're connected to a metered connection, and it kind of tells all the apps that might be running in the background pulling down updates to be quiet when you're on a metered connection to save you some money. So let's talk about the next objective, which is to configure a network adapter. The network adapter is that piece of hardware that connects your PC to either your wireless network or your wired network. Some people call them NICs, N-I-C, for network interface card. Sometimes they're just called network cards. You might call them Ethernet adapters or Wi-Fi adapters or Wi-Fi cards. Let's take a look at how to configure them. We'll need to jump to the desktop to be able to configure our adapters. I find the easiest way to do it is to go down to the network icon down here, right-click it, and then open Network and Sharing Center. Now, in the upper left corner here, I click Change Adapter Settings, and this opens up the Network Connections window, which has not changed a bit from earlier versions of Windows. Now, the amount of configuration you can do for the network adapters is pretty minimal. I mean, we're not talking about the IP configuration. This is covered under different objectives, but for the network adapters themselves, you can enable them and disable them. You can see that this Ethernet wired network adapter here is currently disabled. So I can select it and then either click Enable this network device up here or right-click it and click Enable. When a network adapter is disabled, obviously it won't be in use. So this particular computer had both a wired and a wireless connection, but I had this disabled, forcing it to use the Wi-Fi connection. Now that it's enabled, I actually have two different network connections available. They both go to the same place. You can see here the Network and Sharing Center list connections. It's showing both an Ethernet and a wireless connection. There are a couple of other settings that you can access if you view the network adapter properties. Sorry, that window flipped away, so I just had to Alt-Tab over to it. By viewing the properties for a network adapter and then clicking the Configure button here, I can view the driver details. Now, on the Advanced tab here, you can see some settings that can be really useful in situations where the default settings don't work for you. Honestly, you may never have to change these settings, and you probably won't see it on the certification exam, but I have found changing some settings here could solve some really difficult wireless problems that I had. You see, sometimes newer wireless standards don't support some older wireless standards, and some wireless adapters don't work all that well with some wireless access points. Sometimes you can work around these problems by changing these advanced configuration settings. So for example, this particular property allows you to enable or disable ad hoc support. Ad hoc networks are wireless networks between two PCs or a PC and another mobile device. Ad hoc networks are any wireless network that doesn't involve a dedicated wireless access point. Here you can set the roaming sensitivity. The roaming sensitivity controls at what point the wireless adapter switches from a weak wireless network to a strong wireless network. So there are lots of little settings here that allow you to tweak different things. You won't often have to change these, like I said, but it can be useful. Let's take a look at the settings for this wired adapter. You can see that this driver has a completely different set of settings that can be tuned. Every single driver is going to have different advanced settings. All wireless adapters won't be the same. All wired adapters won't be the same. It's up to the driver manufacturer to specify which properties can be tweaked, but I just wanted you to know that they're there. So because they're all different, I can't show you exactly what they'll be, but be aware that they're there. If you get into something where you want to troubleshoot a network problem and you think it has something to do with the adapter, or if you just want to tweak the performance a little bit, this is a good place to look. Now time for some fun stuff. Let's do a little make-believe. You regularly travel between home and work. Your home network is called Contoso and you have a printer there. So when you're at home, of course, you want to print to your home printer. Now, when you go to your work, Fabricam, of course, you want to print to the printer that's at your office. You wouldn't make any sense to print to your home printer when you're at the office, right? Now, you can set up Windows 8 to automatically do that for you, to print to different printers based on the network where you are. So I'm going to connect to my laptop computer here. It's important that I'm connecting to a laptop computer because only computers with batteries can take advantage of this feature. It's called location-aware printing. It was originally introduced in Windows 7 and honestly it hasn't really changed. So let's open up the network settings. We can see that I'm connected to the Contoso network now. So I'll search the start screen for printers. And there are a couple of ways you can add printers. You could pick add printer here and it uses the new Windows 8 touch interface. I'm going to use the devices and printers control panel applet instead because it gives me a little more configurability. In particular, it's going to allow me to rename the printer, which will make things easier for us. Okay, so we can see it found the printer automatically. I'll just click next. This prompts me to choose a version of the driver. The computer already had a driver that's appropriate for this, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. If it didn't have it, it would probably download it automatically from Windows Update. Now it's prompting me for a name, so I'll call this the Contoso printer. And this prompts me to share it or not. Now, for a network printer, there's not much reason to share it directly, so I'll choose not to share the printer. And on the last page here, it prompts me to set it as the default printer. That's all I need to do, is to leave that selected. So now we can see a new printer here called Contoso printer, and the green check mark means that it's configured as the default. So let's pack up our laptop and go to work. I'll connect to the Fabricam network. Connected. And I'll refresh that and you can see that the Contoso printer is still selected as the default. That's because I haven't previously connected to Fabricam and selected a default printer. So now that we're connected to the Fabricam network, let's add another printer. I'll select that printer. I'll use the existing driver. And then I'll name the printer Fabricam printer. And choose not to share it. Finally, once again, I'm setting it as the default printer. So now we can see that the Fabricam printer is set as the default. Now, you can configure exactly which printers are the default for which networks. From the Devices and Printers control panel applet, select your printer and then click Manage Default Printers at the top here. This dialog shows a list of networks that you've connected to and printed from in the past. So you can see that I've connected to 3 different networks and configured a default printer for them. So the Fabricam network has the default printer of Fabricam printer, and the Contoso network has the default printer of Contoso printer. I don't have to do anything, right? This is a very intuitive way to do things. As the average user, all you need to do is to connect to the different printers, and Windows 8 is going to take care of it for you automatically. Now, for the exam and for the real world where you need to customize things often, you should know where this dialog box is. Again, it was the devices and printers and control panel, and then select a printer down here and then pick manage default printers. And as a reminder, it's only going to work on computers that have a battery. So don't go lugging your desktop around between work and home and expecting it to work. You got to have a mobile PC. Now, if you want to change this, you can select a network from here and then select the printer that you want to print to. And then click Add. That way you could proactively configure a default printer for a different network for a different user, for example. Now, if you prefer the old Windows Vista and earlier versions of Windows behavior where it prints to the same printer no matter which network you're on, select always use the same printer as my default printer here. But I can't imagine why you'd want to use that because the default behavior of using location-aware printing is so much more useful. This is Tony Northrup for Train Signal, and I hope you found the lesson both educational and enjoyable, and I'll see you next time.